Before I begin, I want to really thank all of you guys, everyone here at the table. Uh, you guys have been part of this work and have been instrumental in designing a framework for the entire state. That's what we call the family engagement definition in our guiding principles. I think that's what we need to do every once in a while, is to kind of reflect on our work, think about what we've been doing, and use these guiding principles as a guide to see how we're doing. It's really important for us as practitioners to every once in a while do this, right? And to reflect. Today, we have an opportunity to link these principles to some of the work that we've all been doing during this past year and a half. This past year and a half has been extremely difficult for everybody, for our students, for our families, for our schools. We all know that the pandemic has amplified the inequities that already exist in our communities, that our more marginalized families were disproportionately impacted in a negative way. There are some good things that have happened, though. It has also mobilized our community to find ways to help our more marginalized families. These efforts have created opportunities for innovation and creativity on how to better engage with our families. In Stamford, schools aren't alone. Our parents and teachers and students, in collaboration with community partners, have stepped up to help us connect and engage and build trust with families by providing outreach and support. We have learned that different forms of engagement fosters different levels of agency. At one end, we gather and use different stakeholders' perspectives, feedback, and opinions to inform changes we want to implement. On the opposite end, stakeholders can participate in decision-making bodies that drive change. Agency increases as stakeholders assume more leadership and gain greater responsibility and accountability in instruction and policy changes. Today, I'm really pleased to share with you some of the things that Stamford has been doing, and more importantly, to introduce to you some of the key players in these efforts. But we think about engagement. I think that engagement of going through the connecting, to communicating, to cooperating, to collaborating, to coordinating. In Stamford, we have our partners who are represented here today. I'm really happy to have them here. We have the City of Stamford, who's going to be presenting with Sue Loria. We have the Parent Leader Training Institute, a PLTI group. Regan Allen is here on behalf of the PLTI. Stamford Public Education Foundation is a partner, instrumental. We have their CEO, Matt Quinones, who's going to be sharing some of the things that we've been doing. And we have, of course, Cradle to Career, represented by Katie Murphy, who's been instrumental in having the data piece reviewed. We also have Domus as a key partner in this work in doing the outreach. So, and we do have Jennifer Foreman as well. She's a parent leader. My sidekick here, Dena Booker, who's my mentor, who has been instrumental in pushing this work in Stamford. We have Jenny Canepa, another parent leader. We have Elba Sims, who is one of our stellar teachers in Stamford. We do have Monica Lahiri Horishak, who is our EL coordinator. She oversees all our EL programs. We have Jeff Bianco, who is a teacher and now a teacher leader at one of our interdistrict magnet schools. And last but not least, we have Samantha Samuel. She's a future leader. She's a student activist. She's been instrumental in a lot of the work that we do in Stamford. And today we're going to hear from them. And Dena, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So just to kind of give a little bit of an understanding around how our presentation will go today, we have 5 initiatives which are outlined here in front of you. And then we will each kind of take a little time to kind of explain our initiatives that are happening here in Stamford and how that partnership looks. As you can see, these initiatives are not just Stamford Public Schools, but it really is a collaboration amongst parents, teachers, and community partners as well. And then we will have some opportunities for a breakout session where we'll really dive into some of the challenges and things that we're experiencing here in Stamford. So, but before we start, bear with me as I'm navigating and speaking, so I apologize. But I wanted to first kind of ground our work and ground our conversation around the guiding principles. I know many of you have probably seen these before, but we have our 7 principles. This kind of is our foundation around ensuring that the work that we do is aligned to what we know is best practice and good for families and children in districts. So as you will look at, or as you listen to our presentation, you'll see numbers on the top of our slides, and those really are just the ways that we're aligning what we're doing. And so you might see 1, 3, or 7, and that just means that in these initiatives, we're really building collaborative trust, we're modeling high learning expectations and practices, and we're supporting parents, right? So as we're constantly doing this work, we're always making sure that we're going back to some of these basics to make sure that it really does align. And as long as it's aligning, then we know that we're doing the work. And some of the things that we talk about in our district sometimes too is like we just do things and we're not really paying attention sometimes, but we know that the work that we're doing is meaningful because we can always go back to these guiding principles to align it. So just keep that in mind as you guys are listening to the presentations and to the initiatives, and just pay attention to some of those numbers. We can also like pop these guiding principles in the chat just in case you are not familiar with them.
Dena, can I just jump in here a second?
Yeah, of course.
I do apologize. I do want to make sure that I think I missed Judy Cleto. I think I didn't mention her name, and Susan Loria, who is with the mayor's office. She's here too, and I just couldn't read my screen properly, and I apologize for that.
So no problem, Mike. So we'll jump into the panelists now. Our first one happens to be the initiative that I am a part of. So we have called this initiative stakeholder feedback. And to give a little bit of context around this particular initiative or this particular topic that we're going to talk around, which is focus groups. We in Stamford, our challenge was a survey that we sent out in fall of 2020, which I'm sure many of you have also, did in your districts as well. And this survey went out really to kind of get a feel for how things were going so far, being that we were back in school. However, some were full-time or some were hybrid, some were distance learning. And we really wanted to understand like how things were going with the COVID protocols and just how parents, teachers, and staff were feeling a couple months into school. In this survey, there were opportunities for for all teachers, parents, and staff to either sign up or provide their information if they were interested in having a conversation further around some of the things that were in the survey. And the challenge is that opportunity that was presented in the survey, there really wasn't a clear plan of how that would be followed up in the district. So our department, the Office of Family and Community Engagement, we have an advisory. And within that advisory, we were able to form a smaller subcommittee to kind of look at this survey and look at the development and really analyze, hey, what are some things that we really feel like we can kind of help around focus groups, because we're asking parents if they want to be a part of it. And it's really important that we actually do, right? That what we said that we were going to do. So we as a committee met. And the great thing about this committee is that it wasn't just Stamford Public Schools folks. And this is where Katie Murphy with Cradle to Career and some of our other community partners kind of came in, and some parents as well, to kind of really have a conversation around what's the best way to develop these focus groups and how does this look? How are we going to loop it back to the community? How are we going to loop it back to the district so that it's meaningful and that there's some actionable steps around it? So from that conversation, we were able to form 8 focus groups, and we're able to collect a lot of information and input around key themes. And one of the biggest one was around communication. So that kind of was like the overall theme of the focus groups, but a lot of other things kind of came out of that. And with our outcomes, we realized that you can only get so much, right, in a survey, but when you pull parents together in a smaller group, you can really dig a little bit deeper. And we were able to kind of answer some of those questions that our survey was not able to answer, which was really helpful. And not only were we able to do that, but we were also able to propose actionable next steps to the district and to our superintendent and her cabinet to really say, hey, this is what we're hearing. This is what came out of the focus group. Here are some suggestions for further implementation, and really have those conversations, but also be able to put that data back out into the community so that our families were able to see that what they were saying really kind of had some impact and had some changes moving forward. So as our committee met at the end, we also were thinking about, because we only did these focus groups with parents, our intent was to do teachers and students as well. However, it was kind of towards the end of the school year, and before we, into the summer, and before we were able to really talk about how that was going to look for the other two groups, we really felt like it was important to have a conversation around how do we get some input about what's happening now. And so that kind of leads us into our next part, which is the survey that we did to get some more input about the coming year. So I will turn it over to my co-chair, who is Jennifer Foreman, to explain the surveys.
Thanks, Dena. Can you hear me okay? Great. So yeah, we kind of going into the summer, we were thinking about how we would follow up following the focus groups. And one of the things the committee was considering was, well, do we want to go back? We had just done the focus groups with the parents, but we had also considered talking to students and staff. But we also realized that there were just a whole bunch of questions about what the return to school in the fall was going to look like. And in particular, we were interested in knowing, and this was before the state came out with their decision that we could not do remote learning in the fall. We were concerned about whether those students who were not eligible for the vaccine would continue to, or what percentage of our students would continue to be distance learning. So the district wanted to get, kind of rough numbers about that. The challenge was that the district had just sent out a huge comprehensive climate survey to all of the stakeholders. And so we were concerned that, all these stakeholders were going to look at this new survey and think, why am I getting something else? What is this for? Why should I do this? So we really were very deliberate about making sure that we were targeting our questions specifically to what we wanted, what information we wanted to get. So that it was a very, very short survey. We were also very clear when it was sent out what the purpose of it was, so that the stakeholders who were being asked to fill it out knew why they were being asked to do the survey right on the heels of another survey. And then the other thing was we knew that we had we had a lot of trouble getting feedback from certain communities in our district. If you don't know, Stamford is incredibly diverse. But most of the people who respond to the surveys are kind of more of our advantaged population. So we really wanted to get feedback from a more representative group. So we made a commitment to sending people out to various community locations to try to get a more representative response to the survey, so that we would know more about what everyone in the district was thinking in terms of the return to school. Even though we realized once that the survey went out, the state made its announcement about distance learning, there were still really important questions that we were able to answer in the survey, because we were able to get feedback in terms of concerns that families had about returning to school with the pandemic still going on. And this, the survey was out right when Delta started coming up again. So, there was a lot of, again, with the pandemic, everything's shifting all the time. So to be able to get kind of responses right then and there was really helpful. I think some of the responses were helpful in terms of just understanding that parents were still concerned about safety protocols and wanted to make sure that most of the families indicated that they wanted to make sure that their children were going to be safe going to school. One of the, a couple of the outcomes that we were really particularly proud of is that we did have very good representation from the groups that don't generally participate in these surveys. So that was very useful. Of course, we still have a long way to go to get actual representative responses, but we made some progress with that. And then the information that we got allowed us to go back to the district and tell them what concerns families had so that we could then go back and communicate what the district was doing to address those concerns. So again, we were very deliberate about closing that loop and telling families once they did the survey, this is what we found out and this is what the district is doing about it.
Jen, there was a question about the information with the, can you go back to the slide, Dena, a second? I'm sorry. Do we have the information about the change in the response rate by demographic group? I mean, like how many, we're pretty much close to the proportionate composition of our school, right?
Not as much as I would like it to be. I think we did better with our Latino population than with our Black families, but Katie Murphy would probably have a better idea of how we did there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, I have a visual from our previous survey, but I can't pull it up right now.
That's good.
It shows the comparison, but it was, as Jennifer said, it was better, but not quite equal representation for the population of students in this.
Yeah, and I think that the main message is that we're clearly not there yet, but it was the best response rate that we've ever had in Stamford, and I think that's just shows how what a wonderful job you guys did. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Here to Help with Sue Loria and Matt Quinones.
So my name is Susan Loria, and I work with the Mayor's Youth Service Bureau. And there are two things I wanted to point out when Mike said that our schools are not alone. They're truly not alone. Here to Help through SPEF has been an amazing partner to us. And the challenge that we faced, and this happened prior to just this past September when children went back to school without the distance learning option. But last year when they went back to school 100% distance, all of a sudden every student became somewhat disengaged, right? Because they were physically removed from the buildings. And our challenge was to connect families to the support and resources that they need for their students to be successful. And that was just the very basic of having a hotspot or a device that worked to families in our area that were disproportionately financially impacted by COVID, that needed everything from rental assistance, childcare, help with utilities. And in response to this, and also in response to what we heard from our families and communities via different surveys, we developed a partnership with Here to Help through SPEF. And that basically became a hub where parents and schools parents could self-refer through Here to Help, requesting assistance in any number of different areas, and schools could also refer families. And what this allowed us to do was dramatically increase the bandwidth or the capacity of our schools to reach out to families and find out what they needed and connect them to valuable resources. I also am the coordinator for the district attendance team. So I was very connected to what the buildings and the teachers and staff were saying that they needed. And Here to Help had many, many conversations with families and continues to have conversations with families about what their needs are and how we can improve communication between the schools and families. So basically we have a multi-tiered support pyramid that if any of you are familiar with any type of intervention pyramids or attendance works, this is how we kind of dealt with the different levels of intervention and what needed to happen at the school level, the building level, and parents and students that needed a higher level of intervention. For foundation, and Here to Help was involved in all of these. So at the very base of the pyramid, which is labeled B, all of our students needed foundational support. They needed connectivity in a very real sense, through computers and hotspots, but also in the sense of still feeling connected to their teachers and other students in the building. Healthcare became a priority. And these are things that we worked with the district to help provide. And those foundational supports apply to all students. They helped all of our students remain engaged. We also looked at school culture, family engagement, and parent-teacher home visits. And again, those are supports that went out to and are going out to all students. The parent-teacher home visit was an effort run by Dena and is still continuing. And that has been very successful in terms of helping teachers connect to their students. This is a universal home visit model. Where a teacher can visit all of their students. It's not targeted toward a specific population. And that's kind of the hopes and dreams model where a teacher goes in and meets with the family and gets to know the child better. And it strengthens the bond between the student, the parent, and the teacher, and also the school. Once we realized, and we still have a higher rate of chronic absenteeism than we did before the pandemic, as I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing in Stamford, the highest rates of chronic absenteeism right now are with our 9th graders and our kindergartners. Last year it was with our 1st graders and 9th graders. And here we're doing early intervention, our tier 2 intervention, our school-based resources. We have school-based attendance teams, school counselors, social workers, psychologists, teachers involved. And this is where Here to Help has also become a very valuable resource. For example, over the summer, when our school team's not there, Here to Help was a very valuable resource because we were able to have them reach out to our rising 9th graders, so kids that were in 8th grade in the prior year that had over 20% chronic absent rate, to make sure that those kids were connected to their new high school, knew how to get their schedules, knew when the orientation dates knew when the orientation dates were. So again, Here to Help helped us over the summer when our school resources weren't there. We also have the LEAP home visiting program, which is an initiative by the state. And that's where we're specifically targeting chronically absent kids. It's a model of 4 visits, and it can be conducted by anybody in our school building that has a connection to the school. So it could be a social worker, a school counselor, it could be a teacher, and that's to go out and get to know families. But again, it's targeting chronically absent families to find out what barriers there are to their child being able to attend school and engage with the curriculum. And then our tier 3, a more intensive intervention, we have received funding to increase caseworkers through DOMIS in family centers, where parents need a higher level of support, kind of wraparound services and social work. We're still funneling all of that through Here to Help as our hub. So that way we do have one place where we can find out everything that's going on with a family and all of the referrals that have been made. We have our family advocate program within the schools. That's long-term support for students. That's a relationship that lasts typically 3 years in the middle school, 4 years in the high school. And of course, for intensive intervention, we also have DCF if there is educational neglect and other issues within the family.
Sue,
Next
if I can, Sue, if I can just jump in. First of all, that was a wonderful overview of it. I want to just take a moment to also just highlight how critical all of the existing resources and partners in the city of Stamford are from a community-based organization standpoint and also some government entities. So while Here to Help, organized under the Stamford Public Education Foundation, is the kind of centralized hub, what has really made it so successful is its starting place is really leveraging the existing resources that are available to families within the community. So organizations like Person to Person, DOMIS, Building One Community, CLC, Kids in Crisis, the Food Bank of Lower Fairfield County. I mean, I can go on and on in terms of how many providers have kind of stepped up and aligned their services with Here to Help to serve as a referral and a connection service to what they do, to include Congressman Jim Himes' office, unique things like having access to the child care tax credit is just one example of some kind of unique work that the Here to Help staff has been able to support families with. In terms of the staffing structure, I know there was a question in the chat around funding. So just to give you an idea on how the centralized hub is organized, we have a program manager who supports the supervision of the initiative, which includes 2 trained social workers who are directly connected to families. Families have the ability to contact Here to Help directly, kind of serving as a customer service type line where they can text our family engagement coordinators directly. They can call them, they can use our Here to Help online form. They also have access to WhatsApp phone application, which is used by some members in our community as well. And the overall structure from an annual budget standpoint to operate the information hub is approximately $150,000 annually. And that's been able to cover kind of the staffing costs from that. But it really doesn't illustrate the true cost of this initiative because we are leveraging so much of the existing resources that so many of those community-based organizations that I mentioned are providing. And that's kind of the input from families. The output in terms of the outreach that is aligned with the LEAP program and so many other initiatives that the Office of Family Engagement and Mike and Dena are leading is also building more capacity with the partnership with DOMIS and family centers, as you can kind of see illustrated there on the graphic. And that would be an additional approximate $300,000 that would help support those outreach efforts. And that's when we have families who are candidates for case management, or when we're doing outreach, we're embracing kind of an approach to try and contact them directly through phone, text messaging. But when we exhaust those efforts, we do have the ability to be able to assign families to DOMIS and family centers for that home visiting piece to try and connect with them directly when they're identified by the district attendance team as being chronically absent. So it is really an ecosystem that its starting place is really first leveraging all of those wonderful community partners that are in existence here in Stamford. Sorry, Sue, to jump in there. I just wanted to really point out how much of a collaboration this is, so much beyond just SPS and SPEF, but so many tremendous partners here in Stamford.
Absolutely. And you can kind of think of it as one-stop shopping for our families. We can refer them to one organization that can help connect them with everything that they need. They're not getting bounced around. They've got one person they can communicate with. And when Matt was talking about the 2 social workers, one thing that's very important is they both speak Spanish fluently, which helps our community. And they have developed relationships with these families that are ongoing. So they're building trusting, collaborative relationships, and they're also closing the loop. They're getting back to the school with all of the information about what's happening, what families are saying, and what families need. So as Matt said, it truly is a whole ecosystem that can connect our families, for example, to the food bank, or they could get a subsidy. I'm not sure if subsidy is the right word for the internet, for the high-speed internet thing. So or connect them to tutoring. So it's really helped us meet the needs of our families and also meet the needs of our buildings, because we can also do targeted campaigns as well.
Thank you so much, Matt and Susan. This is definitely great work. We do need to, there's still a lot of room for improvement. We're still working really hard at that. So this is great. Thanks for that.
So I'm going to turn it over to our technology volunteers. In this initiative, we have Regan Allen, we have Elba Sims, and we have Jenny Canepa, who will be sharing their initiative and some of the things that they've been doing with this work. So take it away, guys.
So Jenny is having a few technical difficulties. I do have her, what she wanted to say, and it's unfortunate because Jenny is just an amazing parent, trainee for technology volunteers, and amazing trainer. So therefore, I will be speaking on her behalf. And this is what she would like to share with everyone today. I would like to start by letting you know how we as parents feel the necessity to be included and be an active part of our kids' education, especially after the state made the decision to provide a distance learning education due to the pandemic. As a parent, learning how to be familiar with technology, to know which platforms the district is using, and much more, plus the language barrier, was a big challenge. As soon parents learned about the decision in early April, power parents advocated for kids and requested help from the district. In May, after a meeting with the superintendent between May 8th or 12th, the district started working with power parents in this regard. Some volunteer parents decided to train and help other parents with learning the different platforms. Parents received support from the family and community engagement, teachers and administrators, and started to be part of this group. We choose videos and other materials that we might need to support in the learning process. We are very grateful to have met Mrs. Sims and start working with all these subjects, having some knowledge from her to help us learn and later help training other parents. On October, we attended a session organized for PLTI Education in the New Normal. On November 13th, 2020, we officially had the invitation from the PLTI and Office of Family and Community Engagement to be part of the tech volunteers. In this group, there were parents from Power Parents at B1C, Building One Community, PLTI graduates, teachers, and district staff. Personally, as a PEP, PLTI, PSEE graduate, I want to help the community, so I registered. We had the training from teachers and district staff. Our coach, training, tech, and volunteer teachers were remarkable. They dedicated hours, weeks, months to give us as great support, even during the weekends and night hours, to help us get ready so that we can help other parents. Since we got the training, we have been helping parents in different ways. At the beginning, virtually with training in different hours to try to meet the need of as many parents as we could, and now in person. One-on-one support, training hours, times and places are always posted on the district website. As a part of the group that is training parents with technology, we are very happy to help, and we will continue with this activity, trying to close the gap in technology and the language barrier. We know other organizations are working towards this common goal. For this reason, it'll be great if all of us can join forces to get a better impact in the community and also target the community in need. Thank you.
Okay, I'm up next, and I'm going to be pretty short because really Jenny and Elba were the ones that sort of took it away. So in our community, the Stamford Public Education Foundation, also known as SPEF, who runs the Here to Help, we also run Parent Leadership Training Institute, which some of you may know as PLTI, and the Yukon People Empowering People Communities program, which some of you may know as PEP. So last year, during the pandemic, we launched a monthly webinar series called PLTI 2.0 for all of our graduates. And we had monthly topics and trainings to fit the needs of our graduates. So as Jenny Elba mentioned, October's topic was education in the new normal. So we had first district and school leaders shared their successes and challenges during the pandemic. And then in the breakout groups, parents shared their personal stories of successes and challenges. And what made this a little different than some breakout groups that we've had was at the end of the session, we brainstormed solutions to the challenges. So one of the challenges, as Jenny mentioned, was technology. Parents didn't know how to use the various platforms, Power School, Google Classroom, all that. So an idea was to create a train the trainer model where district staff member, who was Elba, trained the parents in the various technology, and they in turn trained other parents. The other challenge was that some parents just felt like it was like intimidating to do some of the videos, and they wanted live help. They really wanted to be trained from another parent. So we brought our idea to Mike and Dena at the Office of Family and Community Engagement. And as you heard, great minds were already thinking alike and others had the same idea. So we worked together, and then Elba took over and started coordinating the effort. So I'll turn it over to Elba.
So as you all know, March 13th, 2020, next thing you know, all of our kids are learning virtually. And it was so great to see community organizations, parents, district staff begin to work towards a common goal, which I realized was figuring out the technology that would be used to keep the city going. As a teacher, I noticed that many kids didn't have access to technology, platforms, applications, or even the internet necessary to attend virtual classes. Parents were struggling to even comprehend where to go for assistance. So in May, I joined the Office of Community Engagement Committee, and by June, I was on the Tech Leader Committee, vetting videos and working collaboratively with various parents in the community. And these videos were all tutorials on how to utilize the technology their kids were now using, as well as videos to assist parents on how they may navigate the technology. At the end of October, as Regan was saying, they had a meeting, and I ended up meeting with Mike Meyer because we all had the same idea on how are we going to assist these families with all this technological difficulties. So we all agreed that we needed some sort of training in order to assist the parents so they in turn may help their children. So by November 17th, I had the honor of assembling a team of teachers that had tech knowledge to then train the volunteers interested in helping the parents in the community. The staff and I trained each other and went over everything parents were asking for help with. By December 9th, we had our first tech session for the soon-to-be trainers in both Spanish and English. The volunteers consisted of parents, community organization leaders, and Board of Ed staff. All of these amazing volunteers made time during their busy schedules to attend these classes, all which were held between 4 to 8 p.m. at night during the week, and even classes on Saturdays and Sundays. We try to make sure we were able to accommodate all of the trainees' schedule as much as possible. In order to become a trainer themselves, they had to have to complete 2 of the sessions, all of the classes being taught, and then select a class they felt comfortable with that they would in turn want to teach, because they would have to teach this class themselves. They then had to teach the class the following session as one of the staff trainers observed. It was great to see all of us come together so fast and work towards that goal of helping the families in the community. We currently have around 9 trainers that provide virtual and in-person classes to parents in both Spanish and English. We also had Haitian Creole, but are currently looking for more volunteers to continue to assist with this growing demographic. The goal is to find as many volunteers that speak various languages so that we may be able to assist all the families in our community. Several of the platforms and apps that we teach are Parent Portal and Remind. These are 2 ways that the district is able to share information with our parents on how their children are doing, as well as communicate any concerns, questions, interests parents may have regarding school, community organizations, and after-school activities. I truly believe that by educating our parents will provide the support and everything that the Stamford district has to offer. For I believe it will grant the parents the opportunity to become the effective leaders and advocates for their children. And it really has been a true honor to work with the amazing volunteers. And again, I want to express and say these are volunteers who are giving up the time during their day to assist other families in the community. And we don't just teach technology, we literally help them with everything that they may need assistance with, you name it, even if it's just translating a document that they may receive from the school. But again, it's just been a true honor, and I'm very proud of the technology volunteers, and we will continue to do this, hopefully, for as long as we possibly can. We are now officially on class 125, and we would like to continue this. Thank you.
Thank you, Elba, Regan, Jenny. Gracias.
And this is just a quote from one of the parents/trainers. So I'll give a couple seconds so that you can read, and then we'll turn it over to our next initiative with Monica Bahiri-Horzak and Judy Cleto. So I will move it over.
Buenos días, personas presentes aquí en este evento llamado Friday Café. Mi nombre es Judy Cleto, soy una madre líder comunitaria de Stanford, graduada de PEP y POTI.
Buenos días, padres. Estamos aquí reunidos para el café de viernes. Estamos aquí reunidos porque soy líder comunitaria de Stanford y PDT.
Recuerdo que hace muchos años atrás escuché al personal de una escuela decir que los latinos no eran activos en la educación de nuestros hijos. Esto me hizo recordar a mi niñez, porque cuando llegué a este país, mi papá tampoco estuvo activo en mi educación, y la causa fue por la barrera de la comunicación, porque mi papá no hablaba inglés. Esto fue en New York City en los años 90.
And I remember that it was going back from my childhood, because I remember that parents were not involved. Like my father was not involved because of the barrier of the language. And this was because he didn't speak English. This was back in New York in the 90s.
Hoy en día, este es uno de los desafíos que también enfrentan muchos padres en las escuelas públicas de Stanford, donde la mayoría, o el 44% de estudiantes, son hispanos. El español es el idioma predominante, seguido por el haitiano criollo.
And nowadays, that's the challenge that parents are facing, because it's mainly, which is 44% of the students that are Hispanics that are speaking mostly Spanish and criollo.
Aproximadamente 2 años atrás, asistí a una reunión informativa sobre los exámenes de SBAC en la escuela de mi hijo, que era una escuela título 1. Era una presentación de PowerPoint de 45 minutos.
And I remember going back 2 years ago to a meeting of SBAC, and it was called the title number 1. It was a PowerPoint of 20 minutes.
Noté que en una esquina había un grupo de padres latinos sentados con la facilitadora de padres de la escuela. Ella les interpretaba algunas cosas de las tantas cosas importantes que se decía sobre este examen estatal, pero no todo, porque era demasiada información.
And I remember noticing in the corner, there were some parents that were gathered in a corner where there was a facilitator trying to interpret what many of the things that were being said in this meeting from the state meeting, but it wasn't everything was being interpreted because it was too much information.
También no podían hacer mucho ruido para no molestar a los demás.
And also there couldn't be a lot of noise so that they couldn't bother the others.
Igual los padres estaban ahí aislados, tratando de informarse para poder participar en la educación de sus hijos.
And also the parents were being isolated, trying to gather information to be aware about of the information of the children.
Pero eso no termina ahí. Todas las reuniones de las escuelas, incluyendo los open house, workshops, talleres, board meetings, etc., eran solo en inglés.
And it didn't just finish there. All the meetings, open house, board meetings, all the gatherings were always in English.
Es irónico que los padres de los futuros médicos, ingenieros, abogados y maestros que son estudiantes de inglés o no hablan en inglés, no siempre pueden asistir o participar en reuniones de puertas abiertas en las escuelas, talleres de sus hijos o incluso peor, reunión de la Junta Educativa, porque no hay intérpretes disponibles.
And it's unfortunate because these are our future doctors, attorneys, teachers, students that are trying to learn in English, but they're Spanish speaking and they're not able to attend to the workshops, board meetings because everything's in English.
Y no solamente los estudiantes de habla español, sino hay otros idiomas también.
And it's not just the students that are speaking in Spanish, there's also other languages.
Sin embargo, cuando un acusado va a la corte y no habla inglés, la corte debe proporcionar intérpretes certificados que sepan cómo interpretar en la corte civil y penal.
But however, if there's somebody being accused and their person speaks Spanish, that person in Spanish has to have a certified interpreter to be able to interpret for them in the civil or criminal court.
Durante el COVID-19, la situación fue aún peor cuando las escuelas cerraron y se comenzó el aprendizaje a distancia. La frustración, desesperación se hizo sentir muchísimo más en nuestra comunidad.
And when COVID-19 was started, it was even worse because the schools were closing. There was desperation, there was frustration, and more than anything because we were having to be inside.
No solo por la pandemia, sino por la impotencia que existe por la barrera en la comunicación por el idioma.
And not just because of the pandemic, but also the impotency that we have the barrier of our languages.
Muchos padres no estaban familiarizados con la tecnología, pero la barrera del idioma empeoraba aún más las cosas.
Many parents were not familiarized with the technology, but the barrier of the languages even made it worse.
Esta situación causó bastantes problemas como ausentismo crónico, desconexión, depresión y mucho más.
And this caused many other issues. What happened was that they were absent-minded, they were having chronic illnesses and many other things.
El hecho de no poder comunicarse, de no conocer la tecnología, hacía a estos padres invisibles.
And the fact of not being able to communicate or knowing the technology, it made these parents be invisible.
Después de varias reuniones con padres de organizaciones comunitarias, encuestas, el distrito escuchó las voces de aquellas personas que fueron invisibles por años.
And because of many others, the good thing about the community gatherings and polls, finally the districts were able to hear of those people that were not being heard.
La barrera del idioma hace imposible la comunicación de doble vía y sin comunicación no puede existir un partnership con los padres y las escuelas tampoco. También hace imposible la igualdad de oportunidades.
And also the barrier of the languages also makes it a difficult thing to be able to have partnership with schools and have equality as within each other.
Gracias a Dios, la superintendente, junto a una persona que admiro y respeto mucho, Mike Meyer, director de Community Engagement, tomaron cartas sobre el asunto.
Y gracias a Dios, el superintendente y alguien que yo admiro mucho, Mike Myers, que también está involucrado en lo que es el compromiso de la comunidad, nos escucharon.
Laura, eso iba en inglés, gracias.
I'm so sorry. And thanks to God, also the superintendent and somebody that I truly admire, Mike Myers, and he's engaged in the community engagement. I really appreciate it because it's of them that we were heard.
Sí, se formó un comité llamado el Comité de Interpretación y Traducción este pasado abril 2021.
And so this was actually what made this community interpretation of translation in April of 2021.
Gracias a todas las personas que hicieron este comité posible y las que fueron parte de él, como Mónica Lahiri, Hokelchak.
Y gracias a todas las, thank you for all the people that made this community possible, like Monica Lahiri.
Just Monica is fine.
Thank you.
Por último, en toda comunidad siempre van a existir estos retos y desafíos, pero si unimos nuestras voces, somos inclusivos, seremos más exitosos buscando posibles soluciones para todas las problemáticas y también abrirá las puertas para que existan igualdad de oportunidades.
And lastly, if we are able to make these goals and challenges, we're going to be able to be our voice, to be able to be having a solution to the problems, and have equality for everything that we do.
Esto apenas es el principio, pero no el final. Todavía falta mucho por hacer. Igual, mi querido público, se ha logrado bastante y seguimos trabajando por más, como la comunidad orgullosa de Stamford que somos. Gracias.
And now we're not just the end, we're having to work more, and we're not finished yet. We're going to be doing this because of our proud community of Stamford. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You can go ahead, Monica. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Judy's work in this committee and for our district has been phenomenal. And just like Elba highlighted, that we have many parent volunteers who are really making this work happen. Judy Cleto is another one of these parent volunteers that is changing the direction of our school district. So I applaud you, Judy. My name is Monica Lahiri Horacek. I'm the coordinator of English learners in the district. And we wanted to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So that's why you listened. Judy is fluent in both languages, lucky woman. But we wanted to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because you have heard several times today about the important topic of communication with families and that there may be language challenges. And as you know, we are required by federal law to communicate in a language that families can understand. And I'll read to you what the Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights actually says. They say, limited English proficient parents, LEP parents, are entitled to meaningful communication in a language they can understand, such as through translated materials or a language interpreter, and to adequate notice of information about any program, service, or activity that is called to the attention of non-LEP parents. We can put aside that the federal government still refers to families as limited English proficient and focusing on the negative instead of the positive, that these are bilingual families. But I want to point out to you that they are talking about communicating with families. It doesn't make a difference if the child is an English learner or not. It's if the family is limited in their English capability. And we are supposed to be translating or interpreting anything that we communicate with other families. And this is a huge challenge for us. And you saw us experimenting with it right now. So first, Judy was only speaking in Spanish and you did not hear any translation of it. So if that was not your language, you maybe thought, oh my goodness, I have no idea what's going on. Am I in the right place? I really wanted this information, but I don't know what to do, right? We wanted to give you a moment of that. Then we went the next step and we had some consecutive translation going on. That means that you hear the Spanish, then you hear the English, then you hear the Spanish, then you hear the English. Wow, that is great. That is huge. Now, all of a sudden, everything Judy said, if you were not a Spanish speaker, you were able to understand because Laura translated it for you in English. But it took twice as much time to do that. So still not perfect. It's still not ideal. So we still have to think about what is better. And by the way, if you were a Haitian Creole speaker, you couldn't understand Judy's Spanish or Laura's English, so you still were left out. So it's a step in the right direction, but it's not perfect yet. So that was some of the challenge that we decided to take on in our translation and interpretation committee. And to start with, those two terms are they're not interchangeable and not everybody is aware of the difference. So most likely you all are because you're all involved in the same type of work, but I will just highlight that translation is written translation, written changing from one language to another, and interpretation is the speaking when you're changing the spoken language to two languages so everybody can understand. So just that little clarification. So let me take you a little bit on an overview of what our path was. We became very aware that we were in effect, pushing families out of being active participants in their children's lives by not translating and interpreting for them. We had the feedback from the survey that you heard about earlier, but we also were out on the streets through our committee members, because we had many parent volunteers on our committee, and they brought back feedback from people who may have not completed the survey. And the feedback there was that language was a challenge, but we needed to hear more voices. So we also put out a survey to all of our parent organizations and our building and central office administrators, so that they could give us feedback on what types of things they are already doing in the building, what they are struggling with, and what they would like help with. And that helped us see both sides of the picture. We were better able to understand what buildings and parent organizations were trying to do, because none of this is out of malice, right? Everybody is trying their best, but sometimes we're not hearing what the other party needs. So we wanted to hear everybody's point of view and then take all of that together to identify how we could help and how we could move the district forward. So what we did next, while we were collecting all of that survey data, we also decided that it was really important for us to become more educated about what other school districts are doing in terms of translation and interpretation. So we all kind of took on certain school districts that were bigger than ours, that had more experience with this work than we did. And we went and did our action research. We brought it back to our committees, we shared ideas, and we learned a lot. And while we were doing all of that research, we looked at different technologies that were available, since this all happened during COVID shutdown and then the slow reopening, and we wanted to understand how we can use our better knowledge of technology to actually help us move forward. So when we were doing that, we began to test out those tech tools when we were having our committee meetings, and we found that Zoom actually allows for simultaneous translation, which is when I might be speaking in English, but Laura at the same time in a different little room would be speaking in Spanish, and we might have somebody who is translating into Haitian Creole at the same time, and then participants can choose what language they want to hear the conversation in. So those were some tools that we learned about. So now we got our results back from the parent organizations and the administrators. And our results showed that there was a great variety in terms of what people thought that they were doing well and what they needed help with. They pretty much felt that their written Spanish communication was okay. They were pretty confident about that. They did not feel that they were doing a good job with other languages. They didn't have a system in place for interpretation, except for using somebody in the building who happened to be bilingual and kind of calling them in quickly at the last minute to do some interpretation when a phone call came in or when somebody was in the office and needed help. So no real structure to it overall, not in every situation. We also found, and this was interesting, that the feedback that we got from schools on what was working for them and what they were doing did not line up to what we heard from families. Families were telling us that, yes, in one school, they got a lot of support, and then in another school, there was absolutely nothing. And in general, we didn't hear from schools the same information. So that showed us that there was a difference in how we were interpreting what we needed to be doing for our families. So the number one request of our administrators and parent organizations was that they would like to have some really clear guidelines and support from the district so that they would know what to do. What are they required to do? How can they do that? And that would help them make their work easier. So that allowed us to begin to figure out what exactly is that middle of the road agreement where we are supporting the families, but we are not making it too cumbersome on principals and assistant principals and all of their staff who are already feeling overwhelmed, making sure everything works for students. We were able to put together some guidance. We then partnered with all of the different committees to make sure that the guidance was reasonable and actionable. And this guidance included things like technologies that are available to buildings. And by technologies available to buildings, I have to go a little bit aside and say, at the same time, we decided that we wanted to purchased this Zoom technology platform that allows for the simultaneous translation so that all of our whole district meetings are now using this Zoom technology. We were able to convince the superintendent that this is important for our families. She bought in 100% right away. If you come to one of our board meetings, which are in the Board of Education meetings, you will actually hear simultaneous translation there. So we have gone whole hog, as they say, into that. At the same time, we decided we needed to help in all of those emails that go out to families. We heard over and over the feedback was that email communication was not the ideal way to reach our community. So we decided to purchase Remind as a district purchase for all school buildings. They can now use Remind. And if you don't know what that is, it's a messaging platform, which you can use off of your phone, but it's not tied to your personal phone number. And the real special piece of Remind is you can send your message out in whatever language you're comfortable with, and the recipient can choose what language they are comfortable with. So I can send my message in English, and Dena could receive it in German, Laura could receive it in Spanish, and Mike could receive it in Haitian Creole. And I'm just saying your names because you're showing up on my screen. So it's a really cool technology that now buildings can use to communicate with their school buildings. Teachers can use it to communicate with their families also. So these were our big takeaways. We're creating that guidance document for all administrators on what needs to be translated and how to translate it and what tools we have available for them. And then the purchase of the Remind platform for the district was a big success story for our communication with families. And then also moving towards holding all of our district meetings with the Zoom live interpretation platform is also something that I think is a big win that we have accomplished with our committee. Is that enough? No, we're still not reaching all of our families, but I do think that we have made some significant steps in moving forward in embracing more and more of our families who so actively want to be involved in our schools.
Fabulous, guys. Thank you so much. This is incredible work, and it does take a partnership to accomplish that. So thank you so much.
All right, so we are going into our last initiative, which is our LGBTQ+ collaborative. We have Jeff Bianco, who is one of our teacher leaders, and we have Samantha Samuel, who is one of our students. I will turn it over to the two of you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jeff Bianco. I'm going to, briefly talk about my experience because it's relevant to the conversation. I am somebody who was a student in the Stamford Public Schools. I also was a classroom teacher in the Stamford Public Schools, and now I'm a teacher leader, which kind of borders on this nebulous cloud of teacher mixed with administrative roles. So it kind of gives me a sense of the administrative lens. And I mention that because I kind of have a perspective of how our school district supports LGBTQ students from all three of those lenses. As a student in Stamford Public Schools, and I attended Stamford High School in the 1990s, I didn't feel like there was really anything there that made me as an LGBTQ person feel represented or seen. I searched for it. I looked for resources and I could never find it. And while there were teachers who kind of, without saying it, expressed some sort of support to me, I didn't feel like there was anyone there that I could really go to with the particular issues that I faced as a gay student growing up in Stamford Public Schools. Fast forward to 2000, when I became a teacher in the Stamford Public Schools, I started to see a glimmer of hope because when I signed my contract, I did see that Stamford Public Schools is a place that does not discriminate based on sexual orientation. So I felt safe in that respect, but I still wasn't quite sure where do I fit in. You know, other teachers are able to talk about their home life and their husbands or wives or children, and where does that leave me? And then I started to notice that I was not, even though I did have the experience as an LGBTQ person, I was not equipped to really support students in the area of with these issues, in the area of LGBTQ support. And I wasn't quite sure. There was very little, if any, guidance on how to support LGBTQ students at that time. So in 2007, I became involved with an organization known as GLSEN. It used to be known as the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. Now we just go by GLSEN because it's more inclusive. And that informed my work. Well, in the meantime, there were pockets of work going on here in Stamford. There's a wonderful guidance counselor at AITE, Christine Bisegli, who I work with quite a bit. And she and Don Reed from Domus were working together to try to get some more support within the Stamford Public Schools around LGBTQ issues. And Christine leads a wonderful GSA at AITE, where enter Samantha. One of the, I would say, if not the most consistently strong, I should say, because there's lots of efforts around Stamford, the most consistently strong GSA we have in Stamford. For those of you who don't know, GSAs were formerly known as Gay Straight Alliances. Now, to make them more inclusive, we actually refer to them as Gender Sexuality Alliances.
I want to really thank Judy and Betsy for hosting these wonderful events. The Friday Cafe has provided us with great learning opportunities about our work, about families and community. I also want to recognize their leadership and hard work in making the family and community engagement a priority across the state. I'm convinced that Connecticut is really leading this work.